Good morning, dear students. Another Sunday, another sermon from from your professor, not alas from Lawrence Stern. How nice it would be to have been in his church. No matter how boring his sermons, it would have been lovely to have been there. So today, alas, you have only me. I can never forget the day during Donald Trump's first campaign for the presidency in 2016, how he walked onto the stage and he said, "Just me, no guitars." And I thought, oh, this man is clever, because this was a moment when Hillary Clinton had been dancing around with Beyoncé, showing her pop cultural connections, and I thought, not necessarily correctly thought through. So, just me, no guitars, and a few thoughts about our book, and perhaps a little reading from our book to keep the British accent alive in your ears. So the section we read picks up from a moment when Uncle Toby is about to utter something, and it says, "I think," and at that moment the book intervenes for a long period of time in what is a favourite Shandian trope, or Sternian trope, in which interruption is so prolonged that you've forgotten where you were before the interruption occurred, nor is it clear that you absolutely need to go back and pick up the thread. But your author is very careful in these matters, and so yes, you will be going back to pick up that thread, but not for a while. And we learn at last of the aftermath of Uncle Toby's terrible wound at the siege of Namur, and the years he spent. Our author is a bit confused, actually. At one point, it appears to be 3 years. At another point, it appears to be 5 years spent largely in bed, convalescing, until his hobby horse, that is to rule the rest of his life, or at least the rest of the book, appears and sends him off in a whole new direction, has him leaping from his bed and charging off back to his home near Shandy Hall, not in Shandy Hall itself, but he has his own house, and that's where he's headed. So we read a good deal of that progress before returning to the gentlemen, the men in Shandy Hall, who are doing their very best to pretend that something to do with women is not actually happening, something deeply embarrassing and not to be thought about or given time to by real men. So there they are, they smoke pipe after pipe, and these pipes are fragile things with long, thin stems, not the stout objects that later pipe smokers stick in their mouths. These are long, thin-stemmed things that snap very easily, and this happens a good deal, and the men are safely ensconced in a back parlour where they don't even have to think about what's going on among the women. And the great issue of whether a woman should be attended to by a female midwife or a man midwife comes up again, and so the great Dr. Slop, the man midwife, is sent for, while Walter and Toby debate the question of whether it is really appropriate or even permissible for a woman to let a man anywhere near her asterisk, 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 her 5 asterisk part of the body. And Stan is hilarious on the subject of what used to be very English, not particularly anymore, no more than other Western countries, the English prudery and prurience where women were concerned, and particularly women's bodies. It became, for many years, for centuries really, a trademark of the English that they were ignorant of such matters. Thank God it doesn't exist anymore, although people assume it does. And everybody's ideas of the character of the inhabitants of other countries is forged probably centuries ago, certainly is completely out of date. And our idea of the Frenchman and the Italian has absolutely no relevance to a modern Frenchman or a modern Italian who've been swept up in a whole new worldwide consensus of what constitutes in being human. And likewise, Americans are not the Americans that people in Europe think of. We're always way behind. So this classic Englishness is on exhibit here, and Stern is extremely funny about it. He spent a good deal of time, for the sake of his health more than anything else, on le continent, as English people used to refer to France and countries accessible via France. He travelled a good deal and was not by any means ignorant of what other countries were like, and what their countrymen were like, and how English people were viewed, so that he's able to make lots of fun of it. So finally, off goes Obadiah to fetch the man midwife, and he is foreshadowed by the arrival on a small horse of Dr. Slop himself, while he, Obadiah, is on a huge horse, and it's a terrible collision, like a collision between some kind of a giant vehicle, a huge SUV, and a Mini. And in the previous chapter, chapter 8, another joke that Stern loves to play, where he says, "It is about an hour and a half's tolerable good reading since my Uncle Toby rang the bell." Well, it's not necessarily. But we've got on our TV screens in the evening a rerun of 24, the Kiefer Sutherland vehicle that advertises itself over and over as in real time. And real time is something that weighs on Lawrence Stern's mind a good deal. How long are people taking here to read my book? So he introduces Slop. Imagine to yourself a little, squat, uncourtly figure of a Dr. Slop, of about 4.5 feet perpendicular height, with a breadth of back and a sesquipedality of belly, a large belly, of many, many parts, as if it's sesquipedal, which might have done honor to a sergeant in the Horse Guards. Such were the outlines of Dr. Slop's figure, which, if you've read Hogarth's Analysis of Beauty, and if you have not, I wish you would, Hogarth, one of the great artists of the 18th century and of all English history, you must know, may as certainly be caricatured and conveyed to the mind by 3 strokes as 300. If you want to caricature somebody, it doesn't take very many. So he caricatures Dr. Slop, who's coming along, and you have to imagine to yourself like a cartoon collision. Obadiah, mounted upon a strong monster of a coach horse, pricked into a full gallop, making all practicable speed the adverse way, opposite way. Had Dr. Slop beheld Obadiah a mile off, posting in a narrow lane directly towards him at that monstrous rate, splashing and plunging like a devil through thick and thin as he approached, would not such a phenomenon, with such a vortex of mud and water coming along with it, round its axis, have been a subject of juster apprehension to Dr. Slop in his situation than the worst of Whiston's comets. There were comets that were supposed to have roiled up the entire planet in the distant past. To say nothing of the nucleus, that is, of Obadiah and the coach horse. In my idea, the vortex alone of them was enough to have involved and carried, if not the doctor, at least the doctor's pony, quite away with it. What then do you think must the terror and hydrophobia of Dr. Slop have been when you read, which you were just going to do, that he was advancing thus warily along towards Shandy Hall and had approached to within 60 yards of it, when, and within 5 yards of a sudden turn, made by an acute angle of the garden wall, and in the dirtiest part of a dirty lane, when Obadiah and his coach horse turned the corner, rapid, furious, full upon him. Nothing, I think, in nature can be supposed more terrible than such a rencounter, so impromptu, so ill-prepared to stand the shock of it, as Dr. Slop was. But what could Dr. Slop do? He crossed himself, and here Sterne, in case we'd forgotten, in case we were so papist that we'd forgotten what that meant, introduces the image of a cross. Pah! But the doctor, sir, was a papist. No matter, he had better have kept hold of the pommel on the front of the saddle. He had so, nay, as it happened, he had better have done nothing at all. For in crossing himself, he let go of his whip, and in attempting to save his whip betwixt his knee and his saddle skirt, as it slipped, he lost his stirrup, in losing which he lost his seat. And in the multitude of all these losses, which, by the by, shows what little advantage there is in crossing, the unfortunate doctor lost his presence of mind, so that without waiting for Obadiah's onset, he left his pony to its destiny, tumbling off it diagonally, something in the style and manner of a pack of wool, and without any other consequence from the fall, save that of being left, as it would have been with the broadest part of him sunk about 12 inches deep in the mire. A pack of wool being the big packs that merchants, slaves, servants transported up from the West Country, bringing the wool from the sheep, the great flocks of sheep in the West Country, up to London, and most of the great east-west roads in England, in the south of England, were made originally by these drivers, as we call them now, but they were mostly on foot, with huge wrapped-up packs of compressed wool, heavy things. But you can see Dr. Slop as just one such, tumbling off his little pony before Obadiah even got to him in uttermost terror. And, of course, the accident mainly occasioned, since you have to remember that this is a Protestant Christian country, long used to mocking the Pope of Rome and Papism, Roman Catholicism, and so Sterne is able to attribute the awful cartoon-style collapse of Dr. Slop to his crossing himself, letting go of the pommel, or pummel, as Sterne spells it, the pommel of the saddle, letting go in order to cross himself, and losing his stirrup, losing his seat, and falling off into the mud, which then covers him entirely, and Obadiah turning the coach horse round and round to try and stop it, going around and around poor Dr. Slop there in the mud, covers him with even more mud until he is dressed in what Sterne calls the majesty of mud when he comes before Walter Shandy and Toby a little shortly afterwards. So, dear students, I hope you are enjoying this muddy saga, and I hope you're staying safe and enjoying this weather, which at least up here is pretty nice. It's now like about 60 degrees. We've lost that extreme heat, and yet we've still got sunshine. Oh, if it could only stay like this forever. Stay safe, stay well, and all the best from your professor.